Sometimes the loudest message you'll ever send is the one you never speak. Your absence, not your words, not your tears, not your explanations, becomes the voice that echoes the truth. When you vanish without warning, when you choose to disappear instead of debate, something powerful begins to happen. You stop trying to convince them to see your worth, and instead you let the silence reveal everything they missed. Because the truth is, people don't change when you cry, they change when you disappear. The moment you go silent, something shifts in their world. At first, they enjoy the quiet. They think they've won. They believe your silence means surrender. But what they don't know is that silence is not surrender, it's strategy. Because while they sit in comfort, thinking you'll come back, the silence begins to stretch and stretch until it feels like a scream. The absence becomes weight, a haunting, a reminder of something they once had but didn't value. You see, you weren't just someone passing through their life. You were light. You were consistency. You were the energy that kept things moving. And when you take that away, the emptiness becomes unbearable. They look around, searching for your presence in every corner, but you're not there. That absence isn't just a void, it's a mirror that reflects the reality they tried to ignore, that they mishandled something rare. And here's the truth, when people don't value your voice, your presence, your love, you don't argue, you vanish. Not for revenge, not to manipulate, but to protect, to realign, to grow. Because peace isn't found in trying to be understood by those who benefit from misunderstanding you. Peace is found in protecting your energy from those who never deserved it in the first place. That's when the real shift happens. The silence begins to talk, and it talks loud. It speaks in their thoughts when they're alone. It whispers in their quiet moments. It screams in their regrets. They remember the sound of your laughter, the comfort of your words, the way your presence made everything easier. But now, it's gone. And the silence is deafening. You don't need to block them. You don't need to make a scene. Just disappear. And watch how the absence does what your words never could. Watch how the silence tells the story of your worth in ways your voice never had the chance to. So, don't be afraid to vanish. Don't be afraid to remove your light from places that dimmed it. Because your absence has power. It disrupts the comfort they had in mistreating you. It dismantles the illusion they built to believe they could replace you. And slowly, they'll begin to crumble. Not because you attacked, but because you withdrew. Let your absence teach them the lesson they refuse to learn from your presence. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is not to retaliate, not to explain, not to beg for understanding, but to simply protect your peace and let silence do the healing. You don't owe anyone closure when they've already closed the door on your dignity. When someone disrespects your value, repeatedly ignores your worth, or drains your energy, walking away quietly without a trace is not weakness, it's wisdom. People often mistake kindness for weakness. They test your boundaries, assuming you'll always stay, always forgive, always explain yourself. But when you stop talking and start walking, when you vanish without arguing, you shift the power back to you, not in a loud, dramatic way, not with vengeance, but with clarity. Because silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally started caring about yourself more. See, there's a peace that only comes after choosing yourself. After all the conversations that went nowhere, after the patterns that never changed, after you gave them chance after chance, hoping they'd finally get it, but they didn't. And that's when you realize it's not your job to make someone see what they refuse to see. It's your job to protect your heart from being broken the same way twice. Disappearing doesn't mean you're running. It means you're done chasing. It means you've stopped watering a dead plant. It means you've chosen healing over explaining. You no longer need them to validate your pain because you've accepted the truth. And the truth is, they knew how they were treating you. They just never thought you'd leave. That's why when you vanish, it shocks them. It disrupts their comfort. It leaves them sitting with themselves. And this is where the power of your silence becomes undeniable. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it. Every day that passes without your message, without your presence, without your energy, It chips away at their ego because deep down, they start to wonder, did I lose something I'll never find again? That's the question your absence creates. It forces them to sit with their own reflection. It's not revenge, it's revelation. A slow unraveling of the lie they told themselves that they could do better, that they could replace you, that your value was negotiable, but your silence, proves otherwise. So the next time someone makes you feel like you have to explain your worth, remind yourself you are not required to stay where you're not appreciated. You are allowed to vanish, to heal, to grow, and to let their mind destroy itself, trying to figure out why you stopped playing a game they never took seriously. Let your silence speak. Let your absence teach. Let your peace be the final word. There's a certain kind of silence that's louder than any argument, more piercing than any words. When you choose to disappear instead of defend yourself. When you no longer offer explanations to someone who never valued them, something shifts. You no longer carry the burden of trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. You break the cycle, not for revenge, but for renewal. See, people who take you for granted do so because they think you'll always be there. They test your loyalty, not realizing it comes with limits. They get used to your forgiveness, your patience, your energy. They consume it without gratitude. And then one day, when you decide to vanish, they feel the weight of everything they thought they'd never lose. This is where your power begins. Not in confrontation, not in proving yourself right, but in simply stepping away, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Because when someone shows you who they are, repeatedly, it's not your job to repaint them. It's your responsibility to believe them, and then quietly, gently, gracefully, let go. When you vanish, you're not disappearing into weakness. You're returning to yourself. You're reclaiming your spirit from a place that starved it. You're no longer investing in confusion. You're done with mixed signals, done with waiting, done with pouring into someone who never planned to pour back. And here's what they won't expect: your peace, your silence, your refusal to play the same game. When they no longer hear from you, they'll wonder why. They'll scroll through their messages, waiting for your name to pop up. They'll tell themselves, she'll reach out soon, she always does. But this time, you don't. And now they're left alone, not with your voice, but with their own conscience. That silence, it echoes, it grows, it gnaws at them. Because deep down, they know they pushed you to this. And it's not just that you left, it's that you left without making noise. That's what shakes them. And in that silence, a new version of you is being born, one that doesn't seek validation from those who can't love deeply, one that finds joy in peace, not approval, one that is no longer emotionally accessible to people who mistook your presence for weakness. You begin to attract clarity, you begin to attract healing, you begin to become untouchable, not in arrogance, but in strength. Let your absence reveal the value your presence once held. Let them wonder, let them unravel. And while they do, you evolve. You don't need closure from someone who couldn't open their heart in the first place. You just need courage, and you already have it. You already made the hardest move, letting go without needing applause. That's not silence, that's self-respect. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Not texting, not explaining, not defending, just disappearing completely, intentionally, without warning. When someone has become so comfortable with your presence, so numb to your energy, so careless with your heart, your silence becomes your sharpest weapon, and your absence becomes their slow destruction. You see, when someone has been feeding off your attention, your forgiveness, your presence, the moment you vanish, their world shifts. Because they didn't expect you to have that kind of strength. They thought you were hooked. They thought they could string you along forever. They thought they had time to play their games and still keep you around. But when you vanish, not to punish, but to protect your peace, they're left facing the truth they've been avoiding. You were the best thing in their life, and they let you go. There's a kind of silence that speaks louder than any scream. It's the silence of someone who finally realized their worth. The silence of someone who chose not to argue anymore. The silence of someone who's done trying to convince another person to see their value. That silence haunts, that silence lingers. Because here's the truth. People don't start reflecting when you're still talking. They reflect when the noise stops. When the late night texts no longer arrive, when the calls stop ringing, when your energy is no longer available to them, that's when the mind starts to spiral. That's when they lie in bed and ask themselves, what happened? Why did she stop chasing? Why did she stop caring? But the truth is, you didn't stop caring. You just started caring about yourself more. And when you vanish, you're not just leaving a space, you're creating a void. And in that void, they begin to feel the reality they avoided when they had access to you. They feel the weight of your absence, the silence and conversations that once included you, the emptiness in their world where your light once lived. And it's not just about missing you, it's about realizing they no longer have control over you. This is the moment where their mind begins to destroy itself, not because you hurt them, but because they hurt you and thought you'd stay. That realization, it stings. That guilt, it builds. That regret, it multiplies. And as they spiral in their own thoughts, asking themselves why you vanished, the real answer hits them hard because they didn't know how to love you right when they had you. So you don't have to send closure. You don't have to explain why you left. Your silence is the answer. Your absence is the response. You simply vanished like a ghost. And now they're left haunted by every memory, every message they ignored, every call they didn't return, every tear they caused. And while they crumble in their own confusion, you rise in your clarity. That's the beauty of disappearing with dignity. You have to break them. Their own choices will. When you disappear without warning, without argument, without drama, it forces them to sit with something they've never truly faced before, their own reflection. See, when you're always present, always explaining yourself, always reacting to their neglect or disrespect, you become the mirror they refuse to look into. But the moment you vanish, that mirror no longer reflects your pain, it starts reflecting their failure. And here's where the mind turns on itself. It starts asking the hard questions. Why did she leave so quietly? Was I really that bad? What if she never comes back? They try to act unfazed, post a few things online, pretend they're okay, but the silence eats at them. The stillness starts peeling away the mask they wore so confidently when you were around. Because now, there's nothing left to blame but their own choices, their own arrogance, their own inability to treat someone who loved them with care. And this is what they never saw coming. They thought you'd stay and argue. They thought you'd beg for attention, beg for clarity, beg to be understood, but you flipped the script. You walked away without a closing scene. No goodbyes, no explanation, just silence. And that silence, it becomes the loudest teacher they'll ever have. Because unlike anger, silence lingers. It replays in their mind over and over. Every moment they ignored your tears, every time they dismissed your needs, every time they said you were too emotional or too sensitive. Now they're sitting in the quiet, realizing you weren't too much. You were just too real for someone who wasn't ready. And the more they remember what they lost, the more the guilt builds, the more regret creeps in. And here's the catch. They can't unload that guilt on anyone else. You're gone, and you're not looking back. What hurts the most isn't just losing you, it's realizing they pushed you away, little by little, while thinking you'd always return. But now, you're not available for their apologies. You're not around to make them feel better. They have to face the truth without you. That's when the mind crumbles. When they finally understand that the damage they caused is permanent. That you won't be walking back through the door they closed with their pride. You didn't vanish to prove a point, you vanished to protect your soul. And now they're left in a silent storm of their own making, while you move forward, healed, whole, and unbothered. There comes a moment when your energy becomes sacred, when you finally realize that not everyone deserves a response, not everyone earns your access, and not everyone is built to handle the love, loyalty, and light you carry. That moment, that shift, that's when you begin to protect your peace like it's your last breath. Because truth is, people don't always change when they hurt you. They change when they lose access to you. When you vanish like a ghost, it's not about revenge, it's about recovery. You disappear, not to punish them, but to free yourself. You go silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because you said enough, and they weren't listening. So you stop showing up where you're not seen. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop giving your energy to a space that only drains and depletes your spirit. And that's when they feel it. The absence, the vacuum, the empty room that once echoed with your laughter, your compassion, your presence. It starts to haunt them. Because you weren't just anyone. You were their safe space, their peace, their constant. And now that you've gone quiet, they're left with nothing but noise. The noise of their own choices, their own ego, their own carelessness. You didn't walk away with anger. You walked away with grace. You chose self-respect over dysfunction. And in doing so, you reminded them and yourself that sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Sometimes healing comes not from confrontation, but from distance. Not from talking it out, but from walking away. And the most incredible thing about protecting your peace is this: the more you do it, the more clarity you gain. You see people for who they really are, not who you hoped they would be. You stop trying to fix what's broken when you finally understand that some things are meant to stay broken. Not every connection is meant to be mended. Not every relationship deserves a second chance. And not every apology needs to be heard to be accepted. You start to see your worth clearly when you're no longer trying to prove it to someone else. You realize that silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. It tells you who is willing to step up and who is only clinging to you for convenience. It exposes the difference between love and attachment, between connection and control. So protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. And the moment you do, the moment you prioritize your energy, the people who took it for granted will feel the loss, not just because you're gone, but because they finally understand that they never truly deserved the version of you that showed up again and again, despite the pain. There's a moment, a quiet, undeniable moment, when your absence becomes louder than your presence ever did. And that's the power of disappearing without warning, without a fight, without a dramatic exit. When you vanish, when you go silent, it forces them to sit with something they never prepared for, themselves. No distractions, no emotional cushion, no one to blame, just the echo of your absence bouncing off the walls of their own regret. You see, when you stay and keep explaining yourself, justifying your value, begging to be understood, you're giving away your power piece by piece. You're training them to believe that your presence is a guarantee, not a gift. And once they start to see you as ordinary, they stop appreciating the extraordinary parts of you. But when you pull back, when you disappear without warning, that illusion shatters. They begin to ask themselves questions they never had to answer before. Was I the problem? Why did she stop talking to me? Why does it feel so empty now? And the irony? They won't have you to clean up their confusion anymore, because that's what you always did. You fixed the mess. You smoothed the rough edges. You softened the blow of their behavior. You carried the emotional weight for two until you couldn't anymore. Your silence, your absence, it becomes a mirror. It shows them who they've been without your light, without your effort, without your loyalty. And that mirror, it doesn't lie. It reflects every missed opportunity, every ignored warning, every moment they dismissed your pain because they thought you'd never leave. And now that you have, now that you vanish like a ghost, they're left trying to make sense of the silence. And for once, you're not there to guide them. And here's the truth they never expected. Your silence is a lesson, a painful one. Because people think healing comes with closure, with conversation, with understanding. But sometimes healing comes when the conversation never happens. When the goodbye is unspoken and the door closes quietly. That's when they feel it the most. Not in the fight, not in the drama, but in the peace that follows your absence. The peace they were never able to give you when you were present. You didn't leave to hurt them, you left to protect yourself. You didn't disappear to destroy, you disappeared to rebuild. And in that choice, you gained the one thing they lost: power. Because when you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop waiting, you reclaim your energy, your time, your self-worth, and they crumble under the weight of what they never valued until it was gone. Let your silence speak for you. Let your absence be your closure. And never forget, sometimes the greatest transformation begins the moment you vanish. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is no move at all. You don't always have to prove your point. You don't always have to fight to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. Because when someone has underestimated your silence, they never really knew your strength. See, you're not disappearing to escape. You're disappearing to evolve, to shift the energy inward, to pour everything they took from you back into yourself. And this is where the real transformation begins. While they're trying to figure out what went wrong, you're already rebuilding what they tried to break. You're refocusing, you're realigning. You're no longer reacting to chaos, you're creating peace. They don't realize that every minute you're silent is a minute you're healing, growing, ascending. And by the time they notice the weight of your absence, you've already created a version of yourself that no longer needs their validation. You see, this is what they didn't expect, that your silence was strategic, that while they were distracted by control, manipulation, or inconsistency, you were planning your freedom. You were watching, quietly collecting every red flag, every betrayal, every moment they thought you'd tolerate forever. And when you finally vanished, it wasn't sudden, it was overdue. They thought you disappeared because you were weak. But the truth is, you disappeared because you were finally strong enough to walk away. Strong enough to stop negotiating your worth. Strong enough to stop playing a role in someone else's dysfunction. That silence, that was you choosing self-respect over self-sacrifice. And now, as they sit in the space you once filled, they'll realize something. Peace doesn't feel peaceful when it's surrounded by guilt and regret. They thought they'd have time to fix it, time to come back. But time doesn't wait for those who ignore their chances. And you stopped living in potential. You've stepped into your power. Because healing isn't loud. Growth isn't broadcasted. Strength doesn't need an audience. You let them talk while you did the work. You let them assume while you built a life in silence that no longer includes them. And here's what truly breaks them. Not that you left, but that you didn't look back. Not that you're gone, but that you never needed a goodbye. Because when you vanish without explanation, it leaves them with the one thing they tried to avoid all along: accountability. You're not punishing them by being silent. You're protecting your peace. You're teaching them the lesson they refused to learn when you were available. Let your absence continue to echo louder than your presence ever did. Not out of revenge, but out of resolve. When you vanish like a ghost, the most unexpected shift happens. They are forced to meet themselves in the silence. Not the version of themselves they presented to you, not the mask they wore to maintain control, but the raw truth they've been avoiding. Your absence doesn't just take you away, it removes the distraction they use to avoid their own reflection. And without you there, without your energy feeding the connection, they're left in a room full of noise, but it's all in their mind. People don't realize how much they depend on your presence until it's gone, and not just your physical presence, your emotional support, your validation, your energy. When you finally walk away, it's not just silence that follows, it's a haunting. A haunting of the way you loved them, the way you forgave them, the way you tried, even when you were hurting. And now, with nothing left to respond to, their mind becomes the battlefield. The very silence they once dismissed becomes the loudest voice they've ever heard. They start overthinking, replaying conversations, obsessing over texts, wondering where they lost control. You see, you're not even doing anything, but your absence is doing everything. It's confronting them. It's holding up a mirror. It's showing them that the very person they took for granted, the one they thought would always be there, has vanished without explanation. And that mystery, that unknown, it eats at them. You don't have to slam doors. You don't need to give dramatic exits. Just stop showing up for people who make you feel invisible. Walk away with your dignity and let their mind do what it does best when it's left in the dark, unravel. Their thoughts will begin to torment them. They'll begin to feel the weight of every ignored message, every lie, every moment they thought they were in control. But now they are the ones being haunted by questions they'll never get answers to. The most powerful revenge is not revenge at all. silence. It's elevation. It's choosing your healing over their chaos. It's disappearing so fully that the only thing they have left of you is memory. And memory doesn't hug you back. It doesn't reply. It doesn't pick up the phone. And that's what breaks them. Not that they lost you, but that they know they had you and didn't value you when it mattered most. So let them overthink. Let them spiral. Let them talk to everyone except the one person who has the answers. You. And let that silence echo through their mind until they understand what they destroyed. When you vanish like a ghost, leaving no trace, no explanations, and no fights, you reclaim your power in a way that words never could. It's not about revenge, it's about freedom. Freedom from the cycle of confusion, pain, and endless questioning. By stepping away silently, you break the pattern of emotional dependence that both traps you and fuels their control over your peace of mind. This act of disappearing is the ultimate form of self-respect because you refuse to let your worth be defined by someone else's inability to appreciate you. In the moments after you vanish, your absence becomes a silent message louder than any argument or confrontation ever could. It tells them, without saying a word, that you are no longer available to be hurt, used, or taken for granted. This silence forces them to face the reality of what they have lost. The person who once showed up, cared deeply, and gave more than they were given back. It unsettles their mind because it's unexpected and undeniable. They start to realize that your presence was not just a convenience, but a blessing they failed to cherish. This is the power of vanishing. It creates space. Space for healing, for growth, and for rediscovering who you are outside of the relationship or situation that kept you chained. When you stay silent and walk away, you open the door to a new chapter where your energy is no longer wasted on trying to fix what wasn't meant to be fixed. Your silence is not emptiness, but a powerful statement of transformation, a declaration that you are choosing yourself first. Remember, silence in this context is not weakness, it's the loudest form of strength. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows their value and refuses to negotiate it for temporary comfort or false hope. By withdrawing quietly, you avoid unnecessary drama and give yourself the peace you deserve. Meanwhile, the person left behind begins to crumble internally, tormented by the unanswered questions and the absence of closure only you can provide, but will never give. Let this be your reminder. Sometimes the best way to win is not to fight, but to disappear. Not to argue, but to elevate. Not to explain, but to simply be gone. Your silence speaks volumes, and in that silence lies your ultimate power. And when the dust settles, you'll be standing tall, free, and ready for the life you were always meant to live.